we are live and on the drive-in.
This won't be live when they listen to it, though.
That's correct. This will not be live when you listen to it because that's not how this works. But we are live on the drive-in. I'm Cage-Side Jay. This is Cage-Side Mike. We've got a big event coming up this weekend. One of the final UFC on Fox events now that they are moving to ESPN. And a stacked card for Calgary. Making up for that 2002 debut in Calgary that went horribly wrong. The end result was a main event of Uriah Faber and Barao for an interim title after Jose Aldo and however many other fighters fell off that card all those years ago. Dana White has said consistently when he comes back to Calgary, he's going to stack the card. He owes them. Looks like he's done it. So the first question, you've got three former champions atop the card. You got Eddie Alvarez taking on Dustin Poirier for the second time. You got Jose Aldo taking on Jeremy Stephens. Joanna Jędrzejczyk taking on Tisha Torres. Does this card make up for that? Do you think this is stacked enough?
Well, I guess you know what. I think it comes down to who you're fans of, who you want to see. You know, for me, yeah, it is. Like, you know, Eddie Alvarez, Poirier, right? Joanna, like...
And I'm excited to see her fight. I'm going to be down there for the event. That is one of the fights that I'm looking forward to the most. Joanna, she was such a dominant champion until Rose turned out to be her kryptonite. But I think she's still got a lot of fight left in her. She's not that far into her career. She's not that old.
Well, let's be honest too. This card, without Dana White saying, you know, next time we're going to come here and make it up to you, would you ever see these fighters fighting in Calgary?
That's a good question. I mean,
I don't think so. I don't.
Not three former champions, 1, 2, 3 on a card that's not a pay-per-view. The main event is very much a television main event because there's no title, and Alvarez, I mean, he was the Underground King, but he's not a huge draw. He obviously drew with McGregor, but aside from that, I mean, this is a pay-per-view worthy main card when you really look at it. So, yeah, absolutely. And you got Ollie Oban on there. Hopefully I'm going to catch up with him this week. I was talking to him yesterday, and, you know, he's poised to break through the lightweight into the rankings. If he's not, he might actually be top 15 already. I can't recall right now.
You double check that.
But you know, he's a guy who's poised to really do some good stuff at 155. So 1, 2, 3, 4, realistically for me, those are 4 fights that would be on UFC pay-per-view. And if you had that big money fight atop the card, there you go. And you're getting it, and it's not a pay-per-view. It is a UFC on Fox. So and the undercard card's solid as well. You've got, as usual, they're going to stack it with locals, but you got some good talent on there.
Which I never liked that. We've had that conversation, too. I don't know if we talked about it on here, though.
I don't know if we have, but you're right. I do have, and I think we both have the opinion that you don't need to stack with locals when you've got educated MMA fans who just want to see the best in the world.
Well, and the thing is, like, if you're a fan from Brazil, if you're a fan from Canada, you have opportunities most of the time to see these guys fight at some point anyways. Now, if you know one of them and it's a big opportunity for them, yeah, that's great. And I think it's a good way to showcase the talent, but it just seems like when UFC goes to other countries, they just are like, let's grab every MMA fighter from this country that we can, put them on this card, then we'll put a couple good fights, unless it's a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that doesn't sell it to me. Because, you know, I like seeing... It's good to see the best. It should be maybe the best talent from that, you know, the guys that are coming up. Maybe have them be on. But you don't have to scour and find every single guy to step into the octagon that's from Canada when you come to Canada.
And I'm glad they kind of didn't do that here. I mean, you got Jordan Meehan on the card. You got John McDessie on the card. But those are guys who have been around.
Well, McDessie's a good thing.
Yeah. And Jordan Meehan, I mean, he's
a good
been
fight
fighting
too.
for so long at such a young age, and then he retired briefly and came back. And I really do hope the second run in the UFC works out for him. So, you know, we're going to see, but it looks like a great card. So, yeah. Now, one of the interesting fights on this card, I am most excited to see Joanna versus Tisha Torres. that's a fight that if Tisha wins, you gotta suddenly be talking title shot for her. Although you've got Andrade and Carolina ahead of her. Like, this is such a stacked division at 115. And everyone was worried 125. You're gonna water down the strawweights. Strawweights is such a young division. Man, no, not at all. In fact, we see more people coming down from bantamweight than we see going up the strawweight at this point. But
it's it's probably one of the more interesting divisions they have.
Oh, absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
When you think about it, because the way Rose looked in that title fight, she looked amazing. My question is that just a matchup and Rose just happens to have Joanna's number on this, or is this the show? Was that the showcase of what this is? Rose, this is what she's capable of, and how long is she going to hold on to that belt for?
We're going to find out when she has that first non-Joanna title defense. I mean, because she's fought her twice. She's obviously got a number. Are we going to see her come back? That's what I want to find out. But there's another fight on there. That's the fight I'm looking most forward to. But there's another fight, and I made this argument in a piece earlier today. Jose Aldo is taking on Jeremy Stephens. Jeremy Stephens has really come into it. He's a guy who's been there for 10 years. But he was always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Who the fuck is that guy? That's what we know Jeremy Stephens for. Jeremy Stephens had been in the UFC almost a decade at that point. He had fought the best guys at featherweight at that point. And he dabbled in lightweight as well. And Conor McGregor, in a sentence, almost just ran him over with a Mack truck. The Mystic Mack truck.
See,
terrible pun.
I was going to say slap in the face, but Mack truck.
Slap in the face.
But you know what? I wonder, and I would like to talk to him and say, what did that do? Did that make him be like, did that drive him more? I would think it would. To be like, look at this guy coming in. I've been here doing my thing for this long. And,
Well, it made us definitely realize how overlooked Jeremy Stephens was. And now he's come on strong. Now he's really at the best point of his pro career. He's finishing guys. And then you've got Jose Aldo, the former champion, the most dominant featherweight in history. He was a guy who went to the UFC and was handed the 145-pound title. He didn't win that title in the UFC. He won it in the WEC. And when the UFC made the merger, they bought them out, they ran them for a while, and when they merged them on in, Ronda Rousey had the fight for her title. Jose Aldo, they said, no, here you go, dude. You've earned it. You're the UFC champion, and your first UFC fight will be a title defense. That tells you how dominant Scarface was, and he went on to wreck guys in the UFC. He went on to wreck guys' legs.
I was going to say, he held that for quite a while.
Ask Uriah Faber how those leg kicks feel.
Ooh, remember that picture Uriah Faber put on Twitter, and his leg from his hip to his to his calf was like black.
Yeah.
And he was like, I couldn't walk the next day.
Aldo's beaten so many guys.
But you know what? The thing is, though, the fights with Dillashaw, right? Or wait, not Dillashaw. Holloway. Not Dillashaw. I was thinking Brown. Wrong Brazilian. But it's interesting, but Aldo's been around for a long time, too, right? So my question is, how does he come back?
Well, that's what I was going to get to, and this is why it is the fight to watch, because Jose Aldo is at a very precarious position in his career. Look, he hasn't sounded the most dedicated in recent years. He's talked about walking away from the sport on several occasions. He's talked about, what if I could go play soccer? What if I could be a boxer like McGregor? You don't know if his heart is still in it at this point. Conor McGregor broke Jose Aldo before they ever got in the octagon, and I know a lot of people are going to take umbrage with that statement, but he did. He had him mentally defeated before they ever got going in that fight, and 13 seconds later, it was over, and Aldo was on the floor. And then Aldo bounced back against Frankie Edgar, and it was your usual Jose Aldo fight. And you thought, okay, it was an anomaly, it was the mental game. And then this weird confluence of events comes up, and Aldo gets his belt back without ever having won it, which is the weirdest thing to me. And I was at UFC 206, and UFC 206 is why that happened, because Conor McGregor had his second title, and Daniel Cormier and Anthony Rumble Johnson were supposed to be the main event of UFC 206 in Toronto at the end of 2016. And the fight fell through. It got postponed to UFC 210 the following year, and they needed a main event, and they felt like they needed a title fight, so they slapped an interim title on the Max Holloway-Anthony Pettis fight to do it. Now, the only problem was they then had to strip Conor McGregor, and, it didn't take an army like he said it would, but it certainly was it was a fake belt. And the fact that they handed the real belt back to Aldo and then said, so we just took a belt from McGregor. We're handing it to Aldo. And by the way, we've created this paper championship so that we can have a pay-per-view headlined. It was just meaningless. And then Pettis misses weight. Holloway wins it anyways. Holloway goes on to be the interim champ. And you're like, okay, well, what he really is the number one contender. And nobody at that point really thought, okay, he's going to go out and dominate Jose Aldo. They knew it would be a good fight because Holloway was already shutting guys down. But, Cub Swanson comes to mind. At UFC on Fox 15, I believe it was, in New Jersey, which is another one I was lucky enough to be there for. That was a great fight. And we all thought, okay, it's going to be a good fight, but nobody thought it was going to go the way it did. Max Holloway comes in and decimates Jose Aldo, and then he does it again. And I look at that and I go, well, all of a sudden Jose Aldo is 1-3 in his career. What does he do now?
That's a good question. Well, and maybe that's starting to make him think, right? Because I think before that, wasn't he like...
He was undefeated for a decade.
He was like 30, or something like that, 30-something,
I don't know. It wasn't that high, but
it was that high.
It was, he had gone...
But it was like 6 or 7 years he was undefeated.
From 2004 to 2015, I believe. It was 11 years, I think, that Jose Aldo had gone without a loss.
Well, and you got to think mentally, right? Like, we've talked about this before. I don't think it was on here. If you're an athlete at that certain level and you've never tasted defeat, or you haven't tasted defeat for over a friggin' decade, what does that do to you when all of a sudden you've lost? Like, how does that affect you, right? The big one was Ronda Rousey. Like, she succeeded at pretty much everything, and even when she got bronze at the Olympics, that still stuck with her, and she's still, right? And then she actually lost, and that was kind of the end of it.
And I'm glad you brought up Rousey, because we're at a very similar point here with Jose Aldo. Now, he did come back and get the win against Edgar at UFC 200, where he won the interim belt. But aside from that, he's lost 3 of his last 4. He's lost 2 straight to Holloway. If he loses to Stevens, I'm not saying he's washed up as a fighter, because I don't believe he is. I'm not saying he's not one of the best of all time, because he was. But is there any point, if he drops a 3rd straight fight to Jeremy Stevens, is Jose Aldo, does he stick around as a gatekeeper? Is he going to become a B-level guy? There's no point. He was never a big draw either.
No, he was. That's another thing. You know what? I don't know. And I think everything we've seen, and I'll go back to what you were saying, where McGregor had him beat before they even stepped into that octagon. And I think if anyone questions that, if you look at the fight and how that fight went, it makes a pretty strong argument to say McGregor had his number right from the start.
Well,
he was in his head. He had Aldo all over the place, and when that bell rang and that horn sounded to start that first round, I don't know if he was thinking straight or he was like, I'm going to go show this guy and shut him up, and he fed right into what McGregor wanted. McGregor put him down and won.
People like to criticize McGregor because he's brash, he's outspoken, he hasn't defended his titles.
Well, I think the title thing is...
He's very good at what he does.
Yes.
And when you look at it, if you're a high-level wrestler and you're taking on Alistair Overeem, you don't stand and trade. Now, Jose Aldo's not a wrestler, But he's not a one-punch knockout guy. He crushed Chad Mendes with a knee. But Aldo's a guy who broke guys down throughout the course of fights. He's the guy who
your
came
legs
in with
out.
those kicks. Yeah. And instead, he charged out and decided he was going to stand toe-to-toe with McGregor, a guy who is much heavier hand. So, of course, it went badly. So, yeah, I mean, this is the point where I'm at with him. He's not a big draw, so he's not going to get, the Anderson Silva treatment. As dominant as a champion as Jose Aldo was, he's not topping cards and getting some big money fights. And
that's a good question.
And you know what? He is, when you look at this fight, Jose Aldo is a much more decorated UFC champion, and I want to point out UFC, than Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez's best championship reign was in Bellator.
Yeah.
Eddie Alvarez's best fights were in Bellator, quite frankly, against Michael Chandler. But, when you look at this, Jose Aldo is underneath Eddie Alvarez on this card. So he's not going to get the best placement. He's not going to make a ton of money. And if he's not in the title hunt, which he won't be if he loses this fight to Stevens, is there much point in Jose Aldo sticking around? Yeah, he might take one more fight. And again, I'm not saying he's washed up as a fighter, but I'm saying at this level, he doesn't need to do it.
Well, you know what? It's a good question. And I'd almost... Wait, do you think Aldo... How old is Aldo?
Aldo's in his 30s. I can't recall right now if he's like 33.
So he still has time.
Oh yeah.
I think it depends on what he wants to do. I think if he decided, you know what, and maybe mentally he needs it. Maybe he just needs to leave the UFC, go to another promotion for a bit, get everything sorted out, and then make a return. Right? Other fighters have done it.
The only problem with this is in the lower weight classes, your speed goes first, and even being
he's more of a speed guy too.
Yeah, so that I don't know how that goes. I think if he leaves, he might just finish out his career somewhere else, which there'd be a lot of great fights for him in Bellator. But I don't think the UFC wants a Jose Aldo level fighter walking into the competition either.
Well, that's the other thing. You know what? It's a good question, and it makes me think about a lot of things. And I think if I was him, and I was his people, and it really comes down to, I don't think it's his body. I think mentally, there are some obstacles he needs to overcome, right?
But there is the body as well, because let's be honest, the knock on Jose Aldo throughout his just incredible title run and incredible undefeated streak was that he was injury prone. He pulled out of a lot of fights.
He did.
Now, Jose Aldo is responsible for one of the few UFC events to ever be canceled. I don't want to say responsible, I'm not blaming him.
I would say involved.
But the injury to him, because that card was not the most stacked card, I believe it was UFC 176. It was later rescheduled to UFC 179. But because of the injury to Aldo, that card, it couldn't stand on its own. So, you got that card and that fight.
Well, on the flip side, if Stevens wins, this could be like the, I don't want to say launching point because he's been around for so long, but that could be the thing to start getting him over.
I think if Steven wins, he is the inevitable challenger to the winner of Ortega versus Holloway. If that fight happens,
we need that fight to happen.
We do, but there are big questions about Max Holloway's health. His managers come out and said that whole thing about him having a stroke was BS. They never had him left the hospital if he had a stroke, which makes sense to me. I mean, if someone has a stroke, you don't send them packing. You probably keep them overnight at least for observation.
Yeah.
And they said, well, it wasn't water loading and it wasn't this or that. Look, I have no doubt that weight cuts are a big factor for Max Holloway. That dude is drained when he gets on the scales.
Well, that's, I can't wait for the day, and I don't know if it ever is going to happen, where we don't have to talk about fighters cutting weight. Where we don't have to talk about, hey, Romero looks like he can barely friggin' stand and he has to be dragged off. I don't think it's good for the sport. It's not good for the fighters.
The UFC announced it is going to be Yoel Romero versus Paulo Costa, who made a big splash a week or so ago, going down at UFC 230 in New York. That was announced this afternoon.
Good segue.
Yeah, great segue. That's a fight I want to see. There's a lot of talk about both of them and whether or not they're going to pass You saw that Romero's obviously had an issue before. The result of it was tainted supplement, and I think it was like a 6-month suspension. I can't recall if it was 6 or a year. But so far, since then, he's been clean. Costa, people are just complaining he doesn't pass the eye test. We've talked about the eye test before. It's not always the best benchmark,
No.
but I think we are good for the drive-in today. UFC Calgary coming up, and if you are listening to this, let us know who you think comes out on top on that card. You've got Joanna versus Tisha Torres. You've got Alvarez versus Poirier 2, which we didn't really talk about, but that is a much-needed rematch. And, of course, you've got Jose Aldo versus Jeremy Stephens. Let us know what your pick for fight of the night is. Leave us some feedback.
Thanks, guys.